close that curtain, huh? All right. It's just me, but that's okay. This book is Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon by David McGowan. Laurel Canyon Cover-Ups in the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream. I have read a little bit of this book, but I have listened to a few podcasts with Dave McGowan and know the gist of it, and I thought it would be fun to start a YouTube channel and just do a little read along. And if there's anyone that watches this, they watch it. If no one watches it, doesn't matter. Because I'm going to read it anyway. And as I'm reading it, I'm going to highlight some things. And if anybody has anything in the chat they want to add, feel free to do so. I've never done this before, I've never done a YouTube video like this before. I've done some video production stuff, TV stuff, long time ago, and it's been a long time since I've been in front of a camera doing anything but playing music, or doing anything, that's not, I don't know. I was in a music video where I played a murderous doctor, which, if you know anything about Dave McGowan's, just total oeuvre, how you say that word, his total corpus, that is kind of funny. I was in a music video, but anyway, let's get started. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Laurel Canyon, Covert Ops, and the Dark Heart of the Hippie Dream by David McGowan, published by Head Press, with a foreword by Nick Bryant, of the Franklin Scandal, incredibly important researcher. And anything about Nick Bryant, you're going to hear some of his words pretty quickly, and you need to look into him because he is really one of those researchers that is doing work that no one else is coming close to, as far as uncovering facts about the Epstein issue and the Franklin Scandal, things like that. He and Whitney Webb and a couple other people, but those two in particular, I think, have just been consistently. Nick Bryant longer than Whitney Webb, of course, but he's a lot older. But check those guys out. So anyway, foreword by Nick Bryant. Oscar Wilde said of art, "Those who go beneath the surface do so at their peril." And author David McGowan has found that Wilde's quote is quite specific for the rock and roll scene that thrived in Laurel Canyon in the 1960s and 1970s. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon is McGowan taking a hammer to the icons and mythologies of 1960s counterculture, reducing them to dust, swept away by gusts of pomp, pretense, and even deceit. McGowan, though, isn't wielding his hammer with the zeal of an establishment conformist or neocon, but rather in the same forlorn spirit as Nietzsche, declaring that God is dead. As a homegrown product of Los Angeles, with an encyclopedic knowledge of the Southern California rock scene, McGowan appears to be essentially declaring that the gods of his youth are dead. Laurel Canyon was the fountainhead for the peace, love, and brown rice vibes that overflowed America's airwaves as the Vietnam War raged. But lurking beneath its tie-dyed and florid veneer was an exquisite darkness of drugs, unbridled debauchery, full-tilt depravity, and shocking carnage. When readers of this book are delivered to Laurel Canyon's blood-drenched tapestry of murder and mayhem, they will have to decide whether or not those sinister synchronicities are uncanny coincidences, conspiracies, or perhaps a kaleidoscope blending of both. Sprinkled throughout these pages is the ominous specter of the military intelligence complex, and perched quite literally atop Laurel Canyon was the top secret Lookout Mountain Laboratory, which seems to be McGowan's grand metaphor for Dr. Strangelove having a bird's eye view of the nascent hippie movement, treating it as though it were a petri dish brimming with a lethal biological weapon that could be unleashed in meticulously monitored increments. Indeed, many of Laurel Canyon's rock and roll idols had former incarnations steeped in the world of military intelligence operations. Jim Morrison, aka the Lizard King, was one such example. Mr. Mojo Rising didn't much like to talk about his parents and was even known to tell reporters that his parents were dead. That's awful. But as it turns out, Lizard King Sr. was not only alive and well, he just happened to be the commander of the U.S. warships that allegedly came under attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats in the Gulf of Tonkin, sparking America's napalm-fueled bloodbath in Vietnam. It's going to get into it a lot more, but that's one of the craziest facts of reality is that Jim Morrison's dad was, he was the commander of the warships that were attacked during the Gulf of Tonkin incident and were the justification for the U.S. entering into the Vietnam War and, caused countless Americans and Vietnamese to lose their lives, including my own family, which is really one of the reasons why this topic is so important to me and what got me into conspiracy research was a combination of things, but one of those things was my dad losing his brother in Vietnam. And there's a lot to that story that doesn't necessarily make too much sense, or it makes sense only in the context of exopolitical, parapolitical conspiracy research, and I'll talk about that at some point on this channel going on. And if anyone's there, feel free to chime in. Frank Zappa, another major mover and shaker of the Laurel Canyon scene, was certainly the raddest of the rad. So surely he couldn't have had any connections to the military intelligence complex, right? Not exactly. According to the various accounts collected by McGowan, Zappa was a pro-military autocrat who didn't really resonate with the counterculture's peace and love vibe. Like the Lizard King's dad, Zappa Sr. was a cog in the intelligence community's dark machinations. Francis Zappa was a chemical warfare specialist with a top security clearance at Edgewood Arsenal near Baltimore, Maryland. Some readers might recognize Edgewood as the location of ominous mind control experiments conducted by the CIA under the rubric of MK Ultra. I think Frank Olson was at Edgewood. Guilt by familial association has the potential to be an ill-fated formula for speculation. But McGowan relates accounts. Oh, by the way, if anyone is there, if the background noise from the window is too much, say so. I thought it would add some life to the video. Maybe not. Uh, yeah, I'm here in Brooklyn and it's noisy all the time. Uh, so if it's too loud, say something, please. Okay. Guilt by familial association has the potential to be an ill-fated formula for speculation, but McGowan relates accounts of Laurel Canyon luminaries whose own hands were possibly awash in the blood of the military intelligence complex. Consider, for example, Papa John Phillips, who penned the smash hit San Francisco, Be Sure to Wear Flowers in Your Hair, imploring thousands of runaways to make bacchanal-laced pilgrimages to the city by the bay. Hope everyone's okay. Really. Every time I hear the sirens, I'm like, no matter what's going on, you're stuck in traffic and you hear that, or you have to wait for it, it's not worth cursing the sirens or the people, there's somebody's having a bad day, and let's hope that they're okay. All right, so back to John Phillips. He was the son of a Marine Corps captain. Phillips was among the more prominent fixtures of Laurel Canyon who had a particularly interesting interrelationship with the military machine. Rock superstar Stephen Stills was the co-founder of two Laurel Canyon dynamos, Buffalo Springfield and, of course, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Surely then hippie icon Stills couldn't possibly be enmeshed in the military intelligence complex? Maybe, maybe not. The progeny of yet another military family, Stills spent chunks of his childhood in El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Panama, where the U.S. has a history of spreading a genocidal form of democracy. And McGowan has sifted through accounts of Stills actually confessing to running around the jungles of Vietnam in the early 1960s. Anecdotes generally dismissed, as the author notes, as drug-fueled delusions. Side note, McGowan is notorious for not citing his sources. And so I don't know how ambitious I'm going to get with this yet, but I would like to dig into some of these sources, which, if anybody does have clues to what they are, where exactly Stills is talking about running around the jungles of Vietnam, please let me know. This is going to be the part where I mark this, just because I want to come back and find a source for that. There's a couple other things in here too that I'm like, I've heard these in the rock lore, just from reading rock magazines and guitar magazines and stuff. And I don't doubt that Stephen Stills made these claims. And yeah, it's very, very suspect. Even if the claims aren't true, it's very strange. Uh, Tales of drugs, unbridled debauchery, and full tilt depravity are often populated by ethical eunuchs whose elite deviance yields to particularly malignant appetites. And the people calling Laurel Canyon home were no exception. McGowan introduces us to aging beatnik Vito Palekis and his Freaks, a dance troupe of Dionysian goddesses who accompanied Vito to the LA nightclubs where the fledgling Laurel Canyon bands were playing their early gigs. In addition to saturating the dance floors with sultry young nubiles for emerging bands, Vito was also a purveyor of teenage girls for the up-and-coming rockers. McGowan also comments on Vito's swift exodus to Haiti, for reasons explained herein. Vito Palakis certainly isn't a household name, but he was far from being a fringe player on the Laurel Canyon scene, where he and his freaks mingled freely with rock and roll's burgeoning royalty. McGowan collects anecdotes suggesting that Vito may have played a key role in the formation and early success of the Byrds, though his name is conspicuously absent from the autobiographical tome of Byrds co founder David Crosby. We also find Vito in a string of low budget films and in a cameo appearance on one of rock's first concept albums, Zappa's Freak Out. Vito's parental skills, however, left a lot to be desired, as evidenced by the very mysterious and bizarre death of his young son, Godo. It's kind of an insincere way to put it, though, that his parental skills left a lot to be desired, you know, and then his kid died. Anyway, further excavating the idolatry of his youth, McGowan encounters Laurel Canyon fixture Billy Briers, a male madam and gay porn entrepreneur. Briers was investigated for trafficking child pornography in the 1970s, whereupon his stable of male hustlers began coughing up the names of frequent flyers at his bordello, the most notable among them being super freak G-Man J. Edgar Hoover and partner Clyde Tolson. The 1960s was a revolutionary epoch, not only in music but also in Hollywood, and McGowan discusses the symbiosis between the Laurel Canyon music scene and Hollywood's Young Turks, with the box office phenomenon Easy Rider providing a salient nexus between Laurel Canyon rockers and Hollywood upstarts. Many of those upstarts, including Warren Beatty, Peter and Jane Fonda, Jack Nicholson, Candice Bergen, Marlon Brando, Roman Polanski and Sharon Tate, Peter Lawford, Dennis Hopper, Ryan O'Neal, Mia Farrow, yeah, Peter Sellers, and Zsa Zsa Gabor were among Papa John and Mama Michelle Phillips' circle of friends. Also, doesn't Candice Bergen have some interesting connections to maybe the hmm I'm confusing Candice Bergen with someone else. I'm thinking of Grace Zabriskie from Twin Peaks, who has a connection to the through her father to the JFK assassination. Also making the rounds in Laurel Canyon was America's favorite psychopath, Charles Manson. And Charlie and his family weren't just a peripheral flock of crazed killers among the Laurel Canyon sovereigns. To the contrary, the family mingled with many of the canyon's rock stars. Manson even laid down tracks in Brian Wilson's home studio, stunning the likes of Neil Young. He had this kind of music that nobody else was doing, said Neil of Charlie. I thought he had I thought he really had something crazy, something great. He was like a living poet. Like there aren't any actual other living poets around at that time. Um, no doubt Charlie did have something great, and we'll talk about that. Charlie also impressed Terry Melcher, the Byrds' first producer and a major force in sculpting the Laurel Canyon music scene. Melcher also recorded Manson, finding him to be a much more amicable character than David Crosby. Okay. Manson's homicidal lieutenant, Bobby Beausoleil, or however that's said, also had some impressive moves as a guitarist and an occultist. Beausoleil played in a number of forgotten bands that had an occult topspin, one of which even opened for Buffalo Springfield. Bobby eventually landed a gig as a rhythm guitarist for the Grassroots, which later transmuted into the Laurel Canyon band Love. who, if you've never listened to Love, Forever Changes is the name of widely regarded as their best album, and it's an incredible masterpiece of 1960s. Um, I would just say rock, but I think most people would say psychedelic rock, and maybe they would, you know, add some kind of, I don't know, tag to it. There's some songs that have strings behind them, which is really hard to avoid with 1960s rock that's not explicitly hard rock, burgeoning hard rock. Um, but Love was a huge influence on some of the greatest bands. I would consider them one of the greatest bands, but they were undeniably an influence on bands like the Stooges, uh, who Iggy and the Stooges are, to me, in the top three bands, five bands of all time. I can't really, you can't really put a number on it because it changes so often, but they're definitely in the top, 5 to 10 bands of all time. And if you don't think so, I don't know. you're not doing something right, is all I'm going to say. Got to check your head, because Funhouse. I have friends who don't listen to the Stooges, and I just can't. I just don't think they get it. There's something, and they would say, yeah, they don't get it, but huge influence on me. Anyway, McGowan also touches on the grisly Four on the Floor, or Wonderland murders, which left notorious drug dealer Ron Launius and 3 of his gang bludgeoned to death on the floor of a house on Laurel Canyon's Wonderland Avenue. Launius dealt drugs to Laurel Canyon's aristocracy, as well as to porn star John Holmes, then in the twilight of his career. Holmes also befriended LA crime boss / club owner Eddie Nash, who he then betrayed with fatal consequences. Truth be told, the Manson and Wonderland murders were merely spatters on Laurel Canyon's blood-drenched tapestry. In the pages of this fascinating book, McGowan chronicles tale after tale of suicide and murder, while delivering readers to a web of sinister synchronicities. Ultimately, it's up to the reader to decide whether Laurel Canyon, in its heyday, was the counterculture haven portrayed by other chroniclers of the era, or whether it was the epicenter of intrigues whose ripple effects are like the aftershock of a nuclear bomb. Nick Bryant, July 29th, 2013. Wow. I'm going to take a second there and take a sip of water. Like I said, Nick Bryant, one of the premier writers and researchers in esoteric, parapolitical matters. He's kind of been blowing up a little bit with all of the Epstein headlines, and I hope that, I don't hope that, I'm glad. Well, I'm glad that he's getting some more. I wouldn't say mainstream recognition, but closer to mainstream recognition. I saw him on Breaking Points, I think, a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago. He's been on a few other shows that I was surprised to see him. Any exposure of this stuff, and the more exposure that people like Nick Bryant get, I think the closer that we are all going to get to, if not full answers, at least more facts that allow us to establish our own internal answers in the absence of any official answers. Which, what the hell is that really? That means nothing in this day and age. We've gotten so many official answers that are just nonsense. We've had so many things where people who commit horrific acts see no consequences whatsoever. And I think that pinning all your hopes on one person or any event giving us justice for this, giving the victims justice for this, and society justice for the political blackmail that this enables is, I don't want to say a fool's hope, but I think it is far off, and I am not too hopeful of this situation resolving itself. Yeah, that was the forward to Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. I'm going to read a little bit more. Yeah, if there's anybody out there, you know, feel free to jump on the chat and say something. It doesn't look like there is, but that's okay. I'm going to keep going. I don't care. Yeah, and I'm actually going to show this picture. You can see here. This guy, this gentleman here, this young man, and then this older man here. Let's see that. Okay, this young guy, it's Jim Morrison. That's his dad, Stephen Morrison, right there, and they're on ship. It says, before he was the Lizard King, U.S. Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison, correction, and his son James Douglas Morrison on the bridge of the USS, is that Bonhomme Richard? I'm not good with a lot of pronunciations. I apologize. And that's January 1964. 1964. And then there's a quote from Morrison, Jim Morrison. He says, I think these days, especially in the States, you have to be a politician or an assassin or something to really be a superstar. What a load of bullshit. And it says, this book is dedicated to all those whose blood still stains the canyon floor. This book is dedicated to all those whose blood still stains the canyon floor. Yeah. So page 7 here. It began innocently enough. In my normal everyday life, I spend a fair amount of time researching corruption and criminality in the realms of politics and law enforcement. Much of that research has taken me down some very dark and twisted paths, but this was going to be different. I was, after all, going to be vacationing in a lush, and this is Dave McGowan now, sorry. I was, after all, going to be vacationing in a lush tropical paradise, and I really just wanted to turn my brain off for a couple of weeks and forget about all of that. Not long before this much anticipated break from reality, my eldest daughter had given me a copy of Michael Walker's Laurel Canyon, the inside story of rock and roll's legendary neighborhood, which chronicles the Los Angeles excuse me. Not long before this much anticipated break from reality, my eldest daughter had given me a copy of Michael Walker's Laurel Canyon, the inside story of rock and roll's legendary neighborhood, which chronicles the Los Angeles music scene of the late 1960s through the 1970s. It seemed like the ideal escapist entertainment that would undoubtedly conjure up many fond memories of the music that provided the soundtrack to my formative years. What could be further removed from my usual reading material? As is often the case, things didn't work out exactly as planned. Alarm bells started going off in my head soon after arriving at my destination and diving into the book. What was this about secret underground tunnels connecting some of the iconic Laurel Canyon properties? And what about all those mysterious fires that wiped away the homes of a number of prominent singers and musicians? And why were there so many violent deaths so closely associated with a scene that was supposed to be all about peace and love? And what of Walker's throwaway mention of a secret fortified military installation sitting right smack dab in the middle of hippiedom? And why did at least a few of America's new minstrels seem to come from military families and from the world of covert intelligence operations? And how exactly do the casual allusions to pedophilia or something that I can't say, probably get this video taken down, fit into this increasingly curious scene? While Walker had done a decent job of telling the Laurel Canyon story from a mainstream perspective, there seemed to be a much more intriguing story hidden in the details that he tended to cast aside as interesting but largely meaningless incongruities. Before I was even halfway through my sorely needed rest and relaxation time, I was champing at the bit to get back home and dig deeper into this story. And immediately upon my return, I began devouring everything I could find that had been written on the subject. Although I am regarded by many people as a conspiracy theorist, which is more often than not utilized as a pejorative term, I do all of my research through very mainstream channels. I am a big believer in the notion that the truth is out there, but don't expect it to be delivered to you in a tidy package by any mainstream media outlets. Finding it involves assembling a jigsaw puzzle of sorts, with the goal being to gather up all the bits and pieces of information that other writers tend to present as throwaway facts and or interesting anomalies. Sometimes those bits and pieces end up being more than interesting anomalies, but past experience has taught me that if those divergent facts are properly assembled, a new picture often begins to emerge that is strikingly at odds with what is widely accepted as our consensus reality. At the end of the day, it is really all about pattern recognition. If, for example, just a few prominent Laurel Canyon musicians happen to come from military intelligence families, then we could probably safely write that off as an interesting but largely inconsequential aberration. But if an uncanny number of the leading lights of the Laurel Canyon scene grew up in such an environment, then that is clearly a meaningful pattern. And if a few of the new breed of stars happen to have violent deaths intrude upon their personal lives, then that would be a tragic but largely inconsequential fact. But when it becomes clear that violent death surrounded the entire scene, with whole families at times dying off under suspicious circumstances, then that again is a distinguishing pattern, and one that has been all but ignored by other chroniclers of the scene. There is little doubt in my mind that this book will not be warmly received by all readers. In our celebrity driven culture, calling into question the character and motivations of so many widely admired and respected figures from the entertainment community is never a good way to win popularity contests. No. These revered figures are overwhelmingly viewed as icons of leftist causes. It is definitely not the way to win fans among those who consider themselves, excuse me, to be progressives or leftists. But while these lie solidly in the leftward flanks of the political spectrum, there are no sacred cows in either this book or in any of my past work. And I'll take an aside here to say that when he talks about, I would say, killing those sacred cows of these people are considered leftist icons. If you spend any time in left, I'll use the quotes here, left political circles, if you truly believe in, leftist, I keep using quotes because it's the windows, keep shifting. The needle keeps shifting on what's left, what's right. I think we're in a time of flux right now, but I will say that I think various political agendas, both left and right, my left, your right, but both left and right political agendas are used for various reasons, and it might not always be obvious what those reasons are until years later, or just sometime after events have occurred, and you may get. I have been, the last political movement that I got caught up in was the Bernie Sanders 2016 political movement, and it opened my eyes to how I think that political movement was used, and or it opened my eyes to how political movements are used. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, COVID, Black Lives Matter, defund the police. All of these things are mechanisms. Even if they begin organically, there are teams of incredibly intelligent people who they formulate plans to take over organic and movements and create inorganic movements for their own nefarious purposes. It's, the mighty Wurlitzer at work. So don't be swayed by, celebrities and pundits and things like that. They are used, useful idiots. They have no idea how they're being used most of the time, and it's up to you to formulate your own opinions on things and to, but anyway, just to say that, so even though someone like, say, David Crosby, who we'll get to, I think, very soon in this book, just because someone like David Crosby is a quote unquote icon of, I think he's a gun nut, so he's like an NRA guy, but I think he's like a peace guy, or like maybe an environment guy. You got to look at why that is, beyond just assuming that it's because these people are generous and kind, because we know that, if all these rich people were so generous and kind, we would not have any of these problems that we have. These agencies that they create are, shell fronts, and they're yeah, it's insane. So anyway, okay, so McGowan goes on to say, I really have no agenda other than to seek out unspoken truths and better my own understanding of the world we live in. I have no political party affiliations and have never been associated in any way with any governmental or quasi-governmental entities. And for the record, I was not born into the world of military intelligence operations. My rather uneventful childhood was spent in a quiet slice of suburbia with 2 public school teachers as parents. I have never claimed to be in possession of any inside information or to have access to any highly placed confidential sources. My research and the views expressed in my work are very much my own. And while almost all of my past and present literary contributions are generally regarded as being quite controversial, the individual facts contained in this volume are not really controversial at all. All of them, as previously noted, have been mined from very respectable mainstream sources. It is only the way that I have presented those facts, in other words, the way that I have chosen to assemble the puzzle, that makes them controversial. There will be there will undoubtedly be those who will stridently claim that I have carefully cherry-picked facts to paint an unnecessarily dark portrait of many of the iconic figures who make up the cast of this story. Anyone, so the argument goes, could be made to look bad through such a journalistic approach. I would strongly disagree with that assessment, however. Such criticisms, in my opinion, completely miss the point of the book, which is that when stripped of the usual spin that accompanies them, and when assembled so that they become part of overriding patterns, these anomalous facts reveal truths that would not otherwise be visible. So basically, what I'm just I'm sorry I keep stopping, but I hope it if anyone watches this, there's no one here now, which is totally cool. But if someone does watch this video after it gets posted, and it doesn't get taken down for the PDF reference, um, I think that is for us as just human beings. That is how we must go about uh, our lives. Really, that's just it. Is assembling these puzzle pieces for ourselves in ways where the name of this channel is reflective of that. I play guitar, and as a musician, you're interested in music, and this book focuses on one very specific part of the music scene. And in my days learning about music, I've studied a lot of different music scenes, and I've seen these patterns in various music scenes, like political movements. You see when something is unexpectedly popular, and this might piss off some people to say about the 60s music scene, but it had no business being popular. Frank Zappa, regardless of he's a genius or not, the fact that this weird dude making these weird albums, who some of which I love, were only in it for the money, which is his parody of Sergeant Pepper's. We're only in it for the money is an incredible album to me. It blew my mind. I heard it when I was a young teenager. My brother was very into Zappa, and that was one of the earliest ones that he got. And I heard Freak Out, which everybody, oh my god, but no, we're only in it for the money. To me, I was like, okay, this is more relatable for some reason. And then Hot Rats, which is mostly instrumental, but has Captain Beefheart, who's another weird dude who I think we get to in this, because he grew up with Zappa, I'm pretty sure. And then Captain Beefheart was, I don't know actually, because I haven't read this whole book yet. I don't know if Beefheart is mentioned, but Beefheart did some crazy stuff, like making Trout Mask Replica, locking your whole band in a house for like a month and not feeding them, whatever he did. I don't know, allegedly, all the crazy stuff he did. But I know he didn't pay a lot of those guys. He basically kidnapped them because he forced them to stay in a house and you know forced them to work on this album, which is an amazing album, and then never paid them for it. It's a story I've heard. Um, But no, you see someone like Frank Zappa in the '60s scene become popular, and you go, why is this guy suddenly popular? You know, um, he's strange. How did he get the funds to start releasing his own records? Um, it doesn't make any sense. And you say, oh well, the Beatles were strange and they were breaking all these boundaries. Well, it's another strange story. These record labels that were around, and I don't think necessarily all the musicians were aware of the role that they played in this particular type of operation or whatever culture war, because some of them were young. They were so young and they were just naive kids. And if you had a parent or a record company executive, a manager, do this, do that, you're going to go along with it probably. They're giving you money, they're giving you women, etc. So, yeah. Um, yeah, okay. So, another criticism I anticipate is that I did not go out and attempt to speak directly to the people who made up the scene. True enough, but the primary reason for that is that there is very little chance that the aging rock stars and their handlers would have wanted anything to do with me. Other chroniclers of the area have gained access to those involved, but that access has come, or so it appears to me, with a steep price in journalistic integrity. The inevitable result is what amounts to puff pieces with a mind numbing sameness, with the same tired anecdotal stories uncritically told over and over again in the very same way, even when those stories can't possibly be true. I have no desire to serve as a publicist. Yeah, I have no desire to serve as a publicist for the estates of Jim Morrison, John Phillips, or Frank Zappa, nor do I have any interest in filling the pages of this book with the same apocryphal tales told by other scribes. There are any number of literary offerings listed in the bibliography that will provide that type of a reading experience. My goal here is to break new ground and open readers' minds to the possibility that other writers may have left out some of the most important elements of this underreported tale. The story of the scene that played out in Laurel Canyon from the mid 1960s through the mid 1970s is an endlessly fascinating one. It wasn't until fairly recently that the mainstream version of the tale was belatedly told. And even now, it remains a story unknown by most of those who were not a part of it. Virtually everyone has heard of the Haight Ashbury scene up north in San Francisco, but even the most native Angelinos remain ignorant of the even larger music and counterculture scene that played out in the Hollywood Hills. It seems a bit odd that nearly a full half century after the fact, the Haight is almost universally regarded as the birthplace of hippies and flower children, despite the fact that the Laurel Canyon scene preceded and largely inspired what became a parallel scene up north. Why is it that the Haight has been thrust into the spotlight for so long, while so little attention has been paid to the scene that spawned it? Perhaps the Laurel Canyon scene was hiding so many dark secrets that it was better to just let it lie undisturbed. And perhaps it is now time to shine a light into some of the darker corners of the canyon to see what kind of skeletons might be hiding there. All right, so I'm going to stop there. There's no one in the comments asking anything or contribute anything, which again is cool. If you catch this on, you watch this on the replay or something, and you are interested, I guess, as everyone says, do the things, hit the buttons, and that way, the next time I do this, you can be notified, and I'm going to go on here. We didn't make it very far in the book, but I think that's okay because That's not really my point to make it to just get through the book super fast. I am starting this channel just to inform myself and to have a good time. I'm going to read this book anyway. And I am going to do some more videos where I do some reviews of books that I'm not reading currently that I've read already. Maybe I'll do some political videos about things going on right now. Um, and I'm definitely going to do some guitar videos. I mean, that's the name of the channel. The name of the channel fits, and I'm going to shred and just jam out on camera and have some lessons for people. Um, you got to do something to take your mind off of the crazy world we're living in, and playing guitar is number one for me. Um, Nature stuff, do some nature videos too, and maybe some role playing game videos too. I have a lot of interests, coding as well. I actually probably will do some videos about how coding and how I use coding uh, with role playing games, but also how I use coding for this type of stuff, research for parapolitical topics, things like that. I love trying to figure out I don't know, just patterns and things, and coding is a part of that. Excuse me. Like, crazy weekend. I work all weekend, and so this is my weekend. Um, but yeah, I might do another video tonight. So if there's anybody out there, like, subscribe, and have a good evening. You know, wherever you're at in life, and whatever you believe in or have going on. I wish you well, truly, because this world is so chaotic and crazy, and um, yeah, we don't have enough people wishing each other uh, good things out there. So just sending you my love, whoever you are, and carry that on. Go on with this book soon.